Okay, so if you set up all your dependencies correctly, like I just showed you in the previous video, you should be at this point, which should match this point of the tutorial as well. So I have my Android emulator up and running. This is through Android Studio. Um, and so the next thing we're going to do is just start adding pieces and then integrate Firebase. All right, we're going to set up our navigation stack right here. And I gotta put the actual buttons into home so that you can navigate to those other items. So that gives us access to the add item, and that gives us access to the list. One thing right now, okay, is as we go to the next part, we're gonna have to make a small change because this tutorial is set to only has one line that's iOS specific. Before we do that, we're gonna go and start dealing with Firebase. So this is the part of the tutorial that's probably missing the most amount of detail. So I think the video should be helpful here. If you already have a Google account and you're logged in, you may or may not see a go to console. That depends if you've used Firebase before. Either way, you should have a get started button. And so when you do that, you can create a new project. So I already have a couple of demos, but I'm gonna create a brand new one. So we'll do RN Firebase 2020, continue. Whether you wanna allow Google Analytics or not, your choice. I'm gonna just use the default account. And that should create your project. So if you follow along with the tutorial, like I said, this is where I think it's lacking a little bit of detail. One of the first things that you're going to see is that you need to add Firebase to your web app. And that's not immediately clear. I think it's the UI changes over time. And so I'll just show you guys where that is. Before we do that, we'll see, you want to create another file called configuration files, a config.js. And that's going to be straight in the source folder. So we're not putting that because it's neither a component or a screen. So we'll have a config.js, and in there we're gonna put this code, except we have to, this is placeholder to the specific API key and the rest of the configuration that we're gonna have from the Firebase database we're about to create. So like I said, when it says add Firebase to your web app, I'm sure there's some other place to get to it, but we're gonna use this link right here. So this is add an app to get started. This is going to add a web app. So we can call this whatever we need to. We don't need hosting, so we're going to register the app. And this is going to prompt us to pick, no, that's next, that's later. So this is going to be all the configuration information. So now I can go back to VS Code and fill that in. So now this is set up to connect directly to our database. So the next couple of parts. So we'll continue onto the console, and what we want to do is we actually want to create a database. Again, I think those are some of the details that we don't have here. So if we go to database, we don't have one yet. So we're going to create one. And you can go ahead and start in production mode. Test mode is, it's basically no permissions. Anybody can read and write. And that only lasts for 30 days. We want to start in production mode. Then we're going to have to choose a location. Depending where you are, choose whatever makes sense. And I'll just choose US East 1. This takes a few seconds. I've never seen it take more than 15 to 30 seconds, but this is probably the only part of the process that does take a little bit of time. After that, we're going to go and set the permissions for the real-time database that is being provisioned right now. Okay. So if you click on rules, it's not going to look like this. You want to go up here and choose the real-time database and then create on rules. Click on rules, and we're going to say read and write to true. And that's pretty much it in terms of what we're going to be doing here. We'll see that this is the actual data in the database. There's nothing because we just created it. But after we get a couple of these things running, we should be able to see in real time what appears here. So we're going to be making a couple of changes to the other screens. So this is for add item. And this is the only place where you will have to make a change to the code. The reason being that this is an iOS specific component. And so we want to change it to the one that works for both iOS and Android. So make sure you change it up on the import as well, but down in line 31, that used to be alert iOS, but we want that to be just alert. And that should be it in terms of the code working. That's a warning that we're not going to go into too much detail, but if we go to add an item, here's our add item, and one item. If we add that alert comes up, saved successfully, and we can actually go back to the firebase and see that. Look at that, one item. And as you guys know, as you get to know more about Firebase, this is just a collection of documents. The documents are going to be in JSON format, so it's just a key value pair. This is a unique ID that is automatically generated by Firebase. And there's name one item. And the more you add, you're going to see them pop right up. You actually saw that in real time in the background. Okay, so the last thing for this tutorial is just fetching or retrieving from the database. And if we copy and paste all these guys from list, that's part of it. We're going to need to make one other component. And we're going to put that into component. That's going to be item component.js. And that code is here. And that should be all that we need to finalize this tutorial. All right, so if we go back, can go home. List of items should now actually be working now. So there you go, one item, second item. If we go and add a third item, we should see the third item as well, and so on and so forth. You can find the complete code in GitHub, but you're gonna have to make those couple of minor changes and do all the configuration. Just to recap, the small changes that we need to make are gonna be this line 31 and line 8 in add item if you wanna target both iOS and Android. And in app, you're gonna have to make this change for the imports to match how they've taken stack out of React Navigation, and make sure that you install all your dependencies correctly. So yeah, that's it. I definitely didn't go into a lot of the detail. I encourage you guys to go and read this great tutorial. And even this tutorial doesn't have that much detail, but it gets you started with Firebase and React Native.